Apparently, if you want to see some really weird stuff, just head on over to Ohio. The strange urban legends, the cryptid and UFO sightings and hauntings that have come out of this state are abundant. So let's dive right in, shall we? We're going to start off the list with a recent UFO sighting in Middletown. So in June of 2023, a number of residents reported seeing strange lights in the sky over town. The lights were in a circular formation, rotating. A man named Caden Little managed to capture the weird lights on video. We see them hovering in place, rotating in a counterclockwise direction before flying off at such an amazing speed that if you blink, it just looks like they vanish completely. President of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society, Brian Simpson, looked at the footage, saying that the lights definitely weren't from a drone based on the speed at which they flew out of sight. I think this is a pretty cool piece of footage, but what do you guys think? Genuine? Hoax? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. And while you're at it, why not hit that subscribe button as well? Here's a creepy piece of footage from TikTok. A couple was hiking at night in Ohio when they pulled out their camera to film this pair of eyes peeking out at them from the tree line. At first, they thought it was a deer, but at one point they realized really doesn't seem to be a deer. Something about the way the eyes are moving and the fact that deers rarely decide to follow people. I really want nothing to do with human beings. So it becomes pretty clear that there's something else tailing them. Now, we never get to see the creature in full. It lurks in the shadows the entire time, but some commenters have said it kind of moves like a big cat. Others have commented it could be the Ohio grassman or dogman. Whether this was a cryptid or a predatory animal, either would be terrifying. Eventually, the couple wisely decides to hurry out of there. The small village of Sabina once had something of a mascot, a very macabre mascot. It was a mummy. So in 1929, an African-American man in his mid to late 40s was found dead on a road near Sabina. No ID, just $1.40 in cash and a scrap of paper with an address that turned out to be a vacant lot in Cincinnati. The authorities had no idea who this guy was, so they went with the name Eugene. Eugene the mummy was taken to Sabina's Littleton funeral home and embalmed. They put him in a brick shed by a bus stop, thinking maybe someone would recognize him during the 30-day viewing period, but no luck. Folks in Sabina got kind of attached to their new resident though. They cleaned him up, they changed his clothes. Things got really weird though when local kids started playing with him and like moving him around, even swiping his gold teeth. Teenagers would even take the poor guy out on joyrides. The mummy ended up being taken to Ohio State University and was placed on a bench outside the school to like scare students. The Littleton funeral home got wind of this and Eugene was sent back to Sabina, and at this point it was clear the guy needed to be buried. Eugene got a plot in the local cemetery, complete with a stone that says he was found dead in 1929, buried 1964. His identity is still a complete mystery. Next up, we have the case of the Peninsula Python. I think this is one of my favorite stories to come out of Ohio. It's not often that a massive-sized wild python ends up roaming through a middle American state, but in one magical summer in Ohio, that's exactly what happened. In the summer of 1944, something strange happened in Summit County, Ohio, near the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. People started reporting sightings of a massive python about 15 feet long and incredibly thick. Now, at first, authorities didn't take these reports seriously, thinking it might be a hoax or some kind of wild exaggeration. As it turned out, though, what could have gone down as just another one of Ohio's many urban legends turned out to actually be very real. The residents were not making it up. Somehow a large python was let loose. No one could explain how the snake ended up in Ohio, but there it was. During that summer, the residents were terrified as the enormous snake roamed through farms, leaving behind indentations the size of giant tires. To make matters worse, the python even attacked livestock. I mean, of course it did, right? Authorities spent the whole summer hunting this thing down, but it was never found. It just disappeared eventually. Most likely it died from exposure during the harsh Ohio winter. Next up is the Crosswick Monster case. This was a very well-documented case at the time, and is one of the strangest stories ever to come out of the state of Ohio. Just saying a lot. So in 1882, two boys, Ed and Joe Lynch, had a really terrifying encounter with a strange creature in a field. They heard strange noises from tall grass, and before they could react, they said they saw this large lizard-like beast with 4 legs come out of them. The creature approached the two, grabbed Ed in its jaws, and started dragging him towards a hollowed-out tree. Ed's screams ended up catching the attention of nearby men who rushed over to help. They managed to rescue Ed, but he was injured. After the incident, 60 men armed themselves with axes and clubs, and they formed a posse to hunt down this thing. They caught up with it, and the creature then stood on its hind legs. The chase led them to a hill of rocks where the creature escaped into a hole, never to be seen again. The local newspaper reported the story at the time, and it's since become a staple of Ohio's folklore. And I could see why. I mean, a lot of folks saw this thing that day. The exact nature of the creature, still a total mystery. So yeah, I don't know. I just love that story. Anytime there's like multiple people who see something, that just it makes it far more interesting for me. Next is another UFO case. This is the Trumbull County incident. This was a series of events where numerous residents reported seeing these unusual lights in the sky. Even police officers reported seeing things. Multiple residents reported sightings of odd lights in the night sky, describing them as bright and unusual aerial activities. Officer Toby Maloro was on duty that night. He was dispatched to investigate reported lights, and he was driving closer and closer to the source of these lights, keeping contact with the dispatcher, describing what he saw in real time. And at one point, radio communication was suddenly cut off, and his vehicle stopped. Maloro then became engulfed in a bright light from above. He got out of his vehicle for some reason to get a better view and reported seeing this massive circular object hovering in the sky. One of the strangest parts about his description of these events is that even though this thing was massive, it was almost completely silent. After a period of time, the object began to move away, and just as the craft moved off, his car and radio started working again. It's a pretty fascinating case, not just because of the detailed account made by Officer Malero, but all the corroborating reports from other residents as well. Now, a corroborated UFO case is one thing, but mass amounts of people frantically phoning into the police claiming to witness a large mutated octopus man, that is a whole other story. Very wild case right here. So the Octoman case, this unfolded on the 29th of January, 1959 in Cincinnati. It was a series of reports to the local cops about a bizarre octopus-like creature. The first report came from a man who urgently contacted police. He had a hard time describing what he was seeing because no one's ever seen a mutated octopus man before. And then a truck driver phoned up saying he'd encountered an unusual creature while driving into Cincinnati. Reports then just kept flooding in. The common thread with these calls is that people apparently sounded genuinely distressed. The creature was described as very large and had grayish skin, tentacle-like appendages, and a lopsided chest. Not sure exactly what that means, but I don't know, just maybe kind of like hunchback kind of. One witness provided a more detailed account, stating it was large, not a dog or a cat. It leaped in front of my car on 2 legs and was taller than the auto. When I looked back in my mirror, it was moving along the bridge rail. It was 3 or 4 times the size of a man and much bulkier. I have an eye and mind for dimensions, and I know it was huge. If I ever had the opportunity to go back in time, like forget going to Woodstock or anything like that, I'd just be like, take me to Cincinnati, Ohio, January 29th, 1959. I just want to know what everyone saw that night. Like, was it just a guy with a horrible deformity? Was there just something weird in the air that night? Or was there a freaking octopus creature roaming around that bridge? I desperately want to know. The Cedar Bog Monster. So the Cedar Bog Monster is just one of Ohio's many variations of Bigfoot. Back in the 50s, people started spreading stories about a creature hanging out in the Cedar Bog Nature Preserve. It was described as a large, hairy figure standing around 7 feet tall, with eyes that shined in the dark, and a not-so-pleasant odor. One of the most famous sightings was from a couple who had parked near the bog they spotted the huge hairy creature strolling along Woodburn Road, which runs right beside the bog. They hightailed it out of there, of course, and reported the incident to the police. And there would be more and more accounts being reported. People started saying they were hearing strange noises in the woods, like grunts and howls. Some would find massive-sized footprints. Local news even featured the cedar bog monster in a headline. Now, what I wonder is, if this thing really did exist, is it a different creature than the Grassman and Orange Eyes and like all these other big hairy creatures roaming around Ohio? Or are these folks seeing the same creature or species of creature? These are the important questions you have to ask yourself. Another one of Ohio's strangest cases is the Werewolf of Defiance sightings. So in the summer of 1972, on the Norfolk and Western Railway in Defiance, two railroad workers, Ted Davis and Tom Jones, experienced a bizarre and unsettling event that would later be dubbed the Werewolf of Defiance case. It all began with Ted Davis, who, while working away on the railroad, saw something otherworldly. He reported seeing a large, wolf-like creature. The creature actually held a wooden board in its paws, and without warning, it swung the board, striking Ted squarely on the shoulder. The creature then hastily retreated into the bushes like a coward. 5 days later, Ted and his coworker, Tom Jones, returned to the railway for another day of work. For some reason, they didn't quit after that first encounter. Sure enough, the creature shows up again, and this time it was actually a safe distance away from the two, and Ted and Tom then reported their encounters to the local police. Little did they know that their report was just the beginning of a wave of Wolfman sightings in the area. Other reports started flooding in, each detailing sightings of this menacing wolf monster, but reports started to trickle out by the end of that summer. So, did people hear about that first report and just want attention? Was the whole thing a big hoax? Once again, I'd really love to go back in time and just hide by that railway to watch the whole thing play out. Finally, we have the case of the Minerva monster. Back in 1978, folks in Minerva started talking about a hairy creature running around in the woods. A big, hairy, unknown beast. People claimed it was about 7 feet tall, had reddish-brown hair, and looked like a giant ape. Yes, another giant ape in Ohio. There are many. It all started when the Caton family saw this monster near a gravel pit outside their house, and they saw it on more than one occasion. One night they saw it peering at them through their window. It would also hurl rocks at their home. A real awful creature. It scared the living daylights out of them. Of course, they even said it smelled bad, like a mix of skunk and a wet dog. Not exactly a pleasant combo. Authorities were contacted and they came to investigate, but all that was left behind were large footprints around the family's property, leading back into the woods. A number of other residents also made reports about a similar creature around the same time, including the Caton's neighbor. It's still a complete mystery, though, as to what this thing was. The Grand Canyon, one of the most beautiful places in the world, I have to believe. Also some very mysterious stuff going on here.
Yeah, well, let's get into it. Starting off our list today, we have the Great Unconformity, a strange geological phenomenon which has left scientists baffled for decades. You see, the Grand Canyon was formed over millions of years as the Colorado River cut through the Colorado Plateau, eroding the plateau, which is made up of 3 main rock layer sets, which each contain various layers of sediment within them. Each small layer in the walls of the canyon can be dated, and for the most part it's pretty consistent, until of course the Proterozoic layer suddenly jumps to meet the layer formed from the Tappets sandstone. There is a unconformity between the two, and by that I mean that the Proterozoic layer, also known as the ancient Vishnu schist, dates back to over 1.7 billion years ago, and the next layer of sandstone only dates back to approximately 525 million years ago, meaning that there is a significant amount of rock layers missing from the geological record. And the missing layers represent a major part of Earth's history, so scientists cannot figure out a reason as to why they wouldn't be there. It's inexplicable and a total mystery.
One of the creepiest discoveries made in the Grand Canyon? Bones. Human bones. Something that happens pretty often, apparently. The amount of deaths that have happened here are almost impossible to count, let alone solve. all of these cases. There have been tons of human remains found in the Grand Canyon that have never been identified. And some have been identified, but the circumstances of their deaths have never been solved. In 2005, the Cold Case Squad was formed in Coconino County with the sole purpose of solving as many of these cases as they could. The members of the unit are all volunteers, having expertise in careers like the FBI, the Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, forensic nursing, crime scene investigations, National Park Service law enforcement, and more. And some of these cases they're looking into go all the way back to 1955.
From bones to no bones, another great mystery of the Grand Canyon, America's greatest canyon, is a distinct lack of not only rock layers but also dinosaur bones. That's right, despite its ancient origins, dinosaur bones have yet to be found within the rocks of the Grand Canyon. While at first this seems like it could possibly be one of the world's greatest mysteries, there is actually an explanation as to why no dinosaur fossils or bones exist in the area. And that is because while the canyon itself likely does not predate the dinosaurs, the rocks in which the canyon was carved from do. In fact, in some instances, the rocks in the canyon are billions of years older than the oldest recorded dinosaurs. So while the lack of dinosaur fossils isn't necessarily unexplainable, it's still pretty interesting.
Next up, we have the story of the cursed blanket. The story goes that in the spring of 1879, a trader named Don McGuire crossed the Colorado River on his way back to Utah. He'd been finishing up a trading trip in northern Arizona. At the ferry, he met a woman named Emma Lee, who was running the ferry. She needed some of McGuire's goods, and in exchange, she offered him a beautiful Navajo blanket. But according to her, the blanket had a bit of a dark history. Emma told him after they made their trade that her late husband's luck had taken a turn for the worse as soon as he got the blanket. Not sure why she'd say this after having just made a trade. Wouldn't really sell me on it, but I guess, a trade's a trade. It was too late. McGuire wasn't superstitious anyway, though, and didn't believe in any kind of curse. But in the end, McGuire would end up writing that the blanket was a, quote, curse to all who possess it. His luck started getting bad. He began chronicling all his bad fortune, writing that he had suffered, quote, 100 calamities. But as soon as he lost the blanket, his bad luck seemed to stop. He ended up digging further into the history of the blanket and discovered it had been woven by a Navajo woman named Mariana, who had made it for a stranger who rode into town that she had fallen in love with. Only her daughter had also fallen in love with the man. The stranger didn't return either of their feelings though, and the daughter ended up dying, according to the tale, of a broken heart. In a form of revenge, Mariana ended up cursing the blanket, and 3 months later, the stranger's horse was found with an empty saddle, and the blanket was found hanging on a tree branch, stained red.
Next up, we have the fact that the bottom layer of the Grand Canyon, located just below the Proterozoic layer, is made up entirely of metamorphic basement rocks, which are rocks found in the common household basement. Just kidding. They are rocks classified by their igneous intrusions, which means that either magma or lava has either entered and cooled or cooled on top of previously formed rock. This layer of the canyon is referred to as Zoroaster granite. The reason for the existence of the metamorphic rock is the Uinkaret volcanic field, which was the source of at least 150 lava flows that poured into the Grand Canyon. Pretty hot stuff.
The story of Robert Spangler is absolutely wild. How this guy got away with everything he did is pretty astonishing. Every woman who ended up marrying this guy mysteriously died. Mysteriously. One of which at the Grand Canyon. So on April 11th, 1993, Robert Spangler walked into a ranger station at the Grand Canyon to report that his wife, Donna Sundling, had fallen to her death. He said that they had paused to take a picture on the trail, and when he turned back, she was gone. Rangers found Sundling's body about 160 feet below the trail. Her death was ruled an accident. Spangler was never formally accused of causing it, well, at least not for a while. But even though there was no way to definitively prove that Spangler was responsible for his wife's death, it was highly suspicious because 15 years prior to this, Spangler had another wife. and a family, all of whom were found dead in their suburban Denver home in 1978. Spangler had managed to make it look like his wife had killed their two youngsters before taking her own life. So after his third wife had accidentally fallen to her death, Spangler started contacting his second wife again, Sharon. She ended up moving back into his home in Colorado, and on October 2nd, 1994, Spangler claimed that he'd found Sharon unresponsive in their house next to a bottle of Tylenol. She died later that day, and Spangler just happened to receive a $20,000 payout from Sharon's life insurance policy after her death. In 2000, Spangler was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he ended up confessing to all his crimes, all except for Sharon. He admitted to killing his first family because he wanted a new life, and he pushed his third wife off a cliff because he was unhappy in his marriage, because apparently divorce doesn't exist. Anyway, in March of 2001, Robert Spangler was sentenced to life in prison for his crimes, but his cancer took him out 5 months later.
Next on our list today, we have the Hydes, or more accurately, the disappearance of Glenn and Bessie Hyde, who went missing in the fall of 1928. The pair were newlyweds, hoping to run the rapids of the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon in Arizona, making Bessie Hyde the first woman to accomplish the feat. Unfortunately, that never happened, because on December 19th of 1928, the couple's boat was found abandoned, floating upright and fully stocked in the river. The pair had been seen and photographed just a month prior to their boat turning up unmanned in the cold water of the canyon. They had been restocking on goods and supplies when Bessie was overheard wondering aloud if she would ever wear pretty shoes again. Well, there is no way of knowing if she ever did, because as far as conclusive evidence goes, the pair was never found. Although many years later, in 1971, a woman claiming to be Bessie Hyde stated that she had killed her husband Glenn in order to escape his tormenting behaviors. While there was some evidence to back up her claim, documents of Glenn's early life, which would have been pretty easily obtainable, and a weapon, the woman's story is widely deemed as just that, a story. The investigation of the Hyde's death led to the discovery of many bodies found within the Grand Canyon, but none of them actually belonged to the Hydes themselves. Theories about the Hyde's disappearance range from people believing them to have drowned in the river to believing that they were chopped apart by tribes living in the canyon. At this point, it's looking like we'll never really know.
Well, how could I not involve a big hairy ape monster on a list of scary discoveries? Yes, even the Grand Canyon is known for a mysterious creature. Arizona has its own version of Bigfoot, known as the Mogollon Monster, or simply the Arizona Bigfoot. Sightings have been reported all throughout the state, but the oldest report dates back to 1903 in the Grand Canyon. The Arizona Republican newspaper came out with a story about a man named I.W. Stevens, who'd had a horrifying encounter with a big hairy creature near the canyon. He described it as having, quote, long white hair and a matted beard that reached to his knees. It wore no clothing, and upon his talon-like fingers were claws at least 2 inches long. So he'd come across this bizarre creature drinking the BLOOD of 2 cougars, and when the creature spotted him, it threatened him with a club and, quote, screamed the wildest, most unearthly screech.
Next up, we have one of the deadliest airline disasters in American history, which somehow occurred directly over the Grand Canyon and cost the lives of 128 passengers. The freak accident occurred on the morning of June 30th in 1956. Just 1 hour after departing from the Los Angeles International Airport, United Airlines Flight 718 and Trans World Airlines Flight 2 collided in midair above the Grand Canyon. Both pilots had somehow veered off of their designated routes and ended up flying at the exact same altitude in the exact same space at the exact same time. The reasons behind the crash were listed as lack of communication, turbulent weather, and flight rules. However, given the large number of coincidences that led to the accident, the crash of Flight 718 and Flight 2 out of LA holds an air of undeniable mystery.
Finally, we have the Thunderbird, a creature from Native American folklore. giant birds with 20-foot wingspans, creating lightning storms as they flap their powerful wings. There have been reports of massive-sized birds flying over Arizona though, especially around the Grand Canyon, some in quite recent years. One of the most famous stories though dates back to the late 1800s when two cowboys in Tombstone claimed to have shot down one of these massive birds. The story goes that the cowboys were riding through the desert when they spotted this enormous bird perched on a rocky outcrop. They fired at it, as cowboys do, and eventually they brought the bird down. They managed to transport it back to Tombstone, where it was then displayed in a local shop for everyone to gawk at for a while. Again, that's not the only story. Over the years, many people have reported seeing giant birds in the skies over Arizona. Some describe them as having feathers and resembling oversized condors, while other people have said they've seen what looks more like some sort of prehistoric creature, like a pterodactyl.
Deep in the heart of Louisiana, where the water whispers secrets and the fog clings to the ancient trees, the wetlands hide mysteries as dense as their thickets. From ancient cities entombed in mud to creatures that defy explanation, these swamps and marshes hold tales as murky as their waters. So grab your flashlight and let's peel back the layers of mystery in one of America's most haunting landscapes. We are starting off today with one of the most recent discoveries, and that is the fact that Louisiana's coastal wetlands are in deep trouble, according to a new study from Tulane University, which reveals a rapid rise in sea levels that's expected to wipe out 3/4 of these natural hurricane barriers within decades. Published in Nature Communications, the study shows that Louisiana has seen a kind of sea level surge in the past 13 years that we didn't expect to see until much later this century. As a result, nearly all of the state's coastal wetland sites are struggling to keep up, with about 90% of them drowning under the rising tides faster than they can grow. This spells trouble for Louisiana, which has already lost over 2,000 square miles of wetlands since 1932, making cities like New Orleans even more vulnerable to storms. Despite massive restoration efforts and billion-dollar projects to save them, the future looks very bleak for these crucial ecosystems that buffer storms, attract tourists, and provide habitats for wildlife. As the seas continue to rise, the study warns of a quote ecosystem collapse that could decimate these vital areas by 2070. Next up, we are talking about an ancient lost city. George Gella, a retired architect turned amateur archaeologist, has a wild theory about a bunch of granite stones found by fishermen near Louisiana's uninhabited Chandelier Islands, 50 miles east of New Orleans. He believes these stones are actually part of a 12,000-year-old lost city predating ancient civilizations like the Inca, Maya, and Aztec. After 44 visits to the site, Gella is convinced he's found the remains of a submerged city he calls Crescentis, complete with a pyramid that he claims is connected to the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Local fishermen have long pulled up strange square rocks from the area, but granite isn't native to Louisiana or Mississippi, stirring curiosity and speculation. Gella, who has studied the site for nearly 50 years, even has underwater sonar images that he says show clear ruins, including a massive pyramid. Adding to the mystery, he reports a bizarre amount of electromagnetic energy around the pyramid, echoing tales of compasses going haywire, similar to the Bermuda Triangle. Though it kind of sounds like a plot from an adventure novel, many are of course skeptical of Gella's claims. Alternative explanations suggest the granite could be from old shipwrecks or dumped construction materials, and despite the skepticism, Gella's romantic vision of an ancient, hidden city captivates the imagination, but without any concrete proof, this lost city remains a mystery. Next up, we are talking about some ancient artifacts. In the deep woods of west central Louisiana, archaeologists have embarked on a delicate mission at a site in Vernon Parish within the Kisatchie National Forest. Here, they are unearthing stone tools, spear points, and pottery dating back 12,000 years, revealing a timeline of human activity up to the point of European conquest. contact. Discovered in 2003, the site was only recently exposed more widely due to hurricanes and looters, making the work of preservation even more urgent. Using hurricane relief funds, teams are now diligently working to protect this window into prehistoric life before it's further damaged or pilfered. Amidst the backdrop of hurricanes Laura and Delta, which uprooted trees and disturbed the soil, these archaeologists are racing against time to save and study these valuable artifacts, piecing together the rich history of the area's ancient inhabitants. Moving on down our list, we are talking about a skull piece. Okay, it truly doesn't get more mysterious than that. Back in 1985, a fragment of a human skull turned up near Lake Pontchartrain on the outskirts of New Orleans. Initially, all that the coroner could deduce was that it belonged to a woman aged between 25 and 35. Despite the efforts, the age of the bone remained a mystery due to the limitations of technology at that time. The bone languished unidentified for years, with a 2009 DNA test proving inconclusive, lacking enough DNA to match any records. It wasn't until the bone was re-examined with carbon-14 dating at a Florida lab that the true antiquity of the find was revealed. It dated back to between 1504 and 1634 BC, placing the woman in the late Archaic period, contemporary with inhabitants of the famed Poverty Point. More on that later. This startling revelation identified her as indigenous, likely from the same era and region as those at Poverty Point, one of the most significant archaeological sites in the US from that period. Following the discovery, the St. Tammany Parish Coroner's Office engaged with the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, consulting with the Choctaw Nation and United Huma Nation to respect and honor the life of this ancient woman. As Coroner Charles Preston aptly remarked, quote, "No coroner's case is ever closed." Speaking of Poverty Point, I just, gave it a good shout out in that one. What is this place? Well, Poverty Point, now a celebrated UNESCO World Heritage Site, truly stands out as one of Louisiana's archaeological crown jewels. So imagine this. Over 3,000 years ago, long before skyscrapers and smartphones, a pre-Columbian indigenous culture was busy crafting massive earthen mounds with nothing more than tools made from bone and stone. These mounds aren't just heaps of dirt, they are geometric marvels, laid out with incredible precision that could be daunting even with today's technology. The sheer scale and complexity of these structures hint at an advanced society that knew a thing or two about engineering and organization. What's even more fascinating is the mystery shrouding their origins. We're still piecing together how and why these ancient people built such monumental structures, making Poverty Point not only a testament to human ingenuity, but also a puzzle from the deep past. It's a breathtaking reminder of what ancient civilizations were capable of, and honestly, it is as mystifying as it is impressive. Next up, we're talking about an ancient bacteria. So imagine a bacterium so ancient it's been snoozing under a lake in Louisiana for millions of years, only to be rudely awakened during a drilling mishap. This isn't the start of a sci-fi movie, but a very real discovery under Lake Peigneur. Back in 1980, an oil rig, drilling blissfully, punched right through into a salt mine below the lake. This colossal blunder didn't just give engineers a bad day at the office, it also created a spectacular whirlpool that drained the lake like a bathtub, and then inadvertently stirred this age-old microbe from its slumber. This tiny organism, newly introduced to science, might just rewrite parts of what we know about life's resilience. The lake, once famous for its fishing and calm waters, is now a hotspot for those keen on the mysteries lurking in its depths. Isn't nature just full of surprises? I love that. Next up, we are talking about a lagoon creature. Okay, would it really be a list of mysterious discoveries without some weird creature lurking out there? The mystery of the New Orleans City Park has everyone talking. So one day, a woman named Kim and her kids are meandering through the sculpture garden when bam, they spot something slithering in the lagoon. It's not just your average fish story. This thing is serpent-like with scales and a flashy red tail that's making quite the scene just hanging out on the water's surface. Kim, who runs the preschool early early partners, is so intrigued that she's turned it into a project, hunting through sea creatures books and coming up empty. Could this be the Loch Ness Monster's cousin chilling in New Orleans? I don't know. Everyone's got a theory. Internet sleuths are whispering about genetically modified carp, but who knows at this point. The park officials are now on the case, hoping to shed some light on the mysterious aquatic friend with help from experts. So, is it a freaky fish, a misplaced sea serpent, or something else entirely? Next up, we are talking about an ancient cypress forest. Imagine a world where massive woolly mammoths and towering saber-toothed tigers roamed. A scene right out of the Ice Age, set about 18,000 to 80,000 years ago. Back then, the Gulf Coast was a bit cooler, kind of like how Missouri or North Carolina feels today. As the sea levels dipped, more land popped up along the continental shelf, and that's when the bald cypress trees took root in what is now the northern Gulf of Mexico. But then something dramatic happened that wiped out and buried these forests under layers of earth. Fast forward to 2004 when Hurricane Ivan stormed through, uncovering these ancient waterlogged woods. Christine DeLong, a marine geologist and paleoclimatologist at LSU, got her hands on these submerged trees about 8 miles offshore, buried under 60 feet of water. Back in the lab, they tried radiocarbon dating the wood, but it was so old that they had to use alternative methods, finding that the forest dated back to the early stretches of the last ice age, between 42,000 and 74,000 years old. The climate back then was chillier, not just cooling gradually, but in abrupt drops that seemed to sync with sea level changes. In their 2015 and 2016 expeditions, DeLong's team also dug up 18 sediment cores from around the underwater forest site, unearthing not just sand and seashells, but also dark organic peat complete with roots and leaves and even seeds from plants like St. John's wort and rose mallow plants that normally belong on land and not under the sea. This peculiar finding hints at how these forests could have been swiftly submerged, perhaps by rising sea levels or a sudden influx of water from melting ice sheets, burying everything in sediment. This discovery isn't just a peek into a prehistoric world, it suggests that other ancient underwater cypress forests might be hiding along the Gulf Coast, preserved in time, waiting to tell us more about the planet's past climate shifts. Next on our list, we are talking about the Manchac Swamp ghost. The Manchac Swamp in Louisiana is steeped in a spine-tingling legend that mixes history with a touch of the supernatural. The tale centers around Julia Brown, a voodoo priestess known to the local community. It's said that on her deathbed in 1915, she foretold doom for the town with a haunting song that predicted its demise. True enough, on the day of her funeral, a devastating hurricane swept through, obliterating the town and reinforcing the curse's chilling prophecy. This eerie coincidence has shrouded Manchac Swamp in a ghostly aura ever since. Even more intriguing, the swamp occasionally yields relics from that fateful day, bits and pieces of the past that float up from the depths, keeping the story of Julia Brown alive and adding an irresistible layer of mystery to the swamp's already foggy waters. So whether it's the lure of ghost stories or just the thrill of a good old-fashioned mystery, Manchac Swamp holds a special place in the lore of Louisiana's wetlands. And finally on our list today we have the Tunica Treasure Mounds. Constructed centuries ago by the Tunica Biloxi tribe, these mounds aren't just piles of earth, they are monumental achievements of architecture and engineering. The Tunica people managed to create these earthworks for ceremonial and burial purposes without any of the modern technology we take for granted today. No bulldozers, no cranes, just human hands and an intimate knowledge of the land. Digging into these mounds, archaeologists have unearthed a treasure trove of artifacts that would make any history buff's heart skip a beat. We're talking about pottery that could rival any modern art, tools crafted with such precision they're almost surgical, and jewelry that shows a level of craftsmanship that is seriously impressive. These finds are not just cool old things, they give us a sneak peek into the daily life and spiritual practices of the Tunica people, showcasing their high skill level fossils, and deep cultural significance. What's even more amazing, perhaps the most amazing, is that there's still so much mystery shrouding these mounds. Each excavation can potentially reveal new secrets, offering more clues about how the early inhabitants of Louisiana lived and what these mounds meant to them. It's a puzzle that's far from complete, and that's what makes the Tunica treasure mounds not just fascinating, but also a little bit magical. Who knows what discoveries await around the next shovel of earth?
There are so many discoveries that leave scientists baffled that it's hard to keep track of them all. But here are some found recently in Alaska that left scientists terrified. Starting off our list today, we have the mystery of the color-changing Alaskan rivers. In recent years, scientists have found themselves bewildered by the changes in their waterways, including the 451 kilometers 280 miles of the monumental Kobuk River twists and turns through the northwest Alaska. Scrambling to figure out just what the heck is going on, and why not only have these waters started to turn orange, but why they have also experienced an extreme increase in acidity, the United States Geological Survey partnered with the National Park Service and the University of California, Davis, and the University of Alaska, Anchorage, and Public Pacific University together have set out to map the extent of the contamination as well as its impact on the ecosystem and the cause of it all. While the large group of scientists found their work to be inconclusive, they did come up with a few good theories. The first being that rising temperatures in the Arctic, which has been warming at an alarming rate of almost 4 times faster than the rest of the world, has caused permafrost to begin to thaw in certain areas of the state, releasing iron that had previously been held within the ice. Another theory suggests that not only was the color change due to excess levels of iron, but also the presence of bacteria, reducing the oxidized iron into the soil, which upon contact with the oxygenated water turned a vibrant shade of orange and raised acidity levels to rival those of actual orange juice. Next up, we have vampire fish rain. It's like that song Acid Rain, but instead of acid rain, it's vampire fish falling from the sky. Now, if you're starting to think I've lost my mind, let me explain. The sea lamprey, commonly referred to as the vampire fish, has been around since at least the 1800s, which is when it was first discovered. The jawless fish, which can grow up to 15 inches long, earned its nickname due to the fact that its mouth, which is ringed with many rows of sharp teeth, works as a suction cup, which allows it to attach and suck the blood of its prey along with other bodily fluids. So now that we know what they are, let's just imagine what would happen if they started falling from the sky in our lawns, roadways, parking lots, beaches, and more. Well, the people of Fairbanks, Alaska don't have to imagine, as in 2015, it actually happened. Over the span of about a week, the Alaskan Department of Fish and Game received several calls from the residents of the town claiming to have found the fish popping up in the most unlikely places. Now, some people have claimed this was due to seagulls scooping them up from the fresh waters and dropping them on land, but like there were a lot, and besides, vampire fish rain sounds way cooler anyways. Kushtaka is next on our list, also known as the land otter man. The creature, which many locals claim to have seen, is said to be a mythical shape-shifting being that has commonly been referred to in the legends told by the Tlingit peoples of the Pacific Northwest coast on North America. In some of the legends told, Kushtakas are described as monsters, cruel creatures who drag sailors to their deaths. However, other stories have depicted them as friendly and helping, with some even claiming that the creatures have often saved humans by freezing to death in the cold Alaskan climate. So it's a bit of a toss-up on this one. Are they good or are they bad? And are they even real? I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out. Coming up next, we have the Slide Cemetery, located in the Klondike Gold Rush National Park. It was a dark day when scientists discovered the graves of an estimated 48 to 100 people, it's unknown as the records weren't so great back then, who perished in what is now described as the darkest day in the Klondike Gold Rush history. On April 3rd of 1898, many Alaskan people took to the Chilkoot Trail in an effort to quickly reach the Klondike goldfields, but unfortunately a large number of them never never made it to the intended destination. It seems the deceased, filled with dreams of collecting riches, failed to heed the many warnings of weather concerns in the area, and as the aspiring gold collectors made their way up the steep trails, the wet spring weather and loose dirt and rock caused a 10-acre avalanche, ending the lives of many and turning what was once a booming gold town into a desolate and melancholy area of mourning. The cemetery stands today as a reminder of this dark day in history. Up next, we have Lady of the Lake, the discovery of which left scientists and historians baffled and disturbed. So if you're picturing some ghostly woman standing at the edge of the water with decrepit skin and strangly hair, whose presence is depicted in horror stories and folklore, well, you'd be wrong. The Lady of the Lake is actually an abandoned WB-29 bomber aircraft, tail number 4462214. The aircraft, which flew in the 1940s during World War II, was used to detect evidence of nuclear testing from the Soviet Union while flying back and forth between Alaska and Japan. Makes sense, but what doesn't is how the aircraft ended up in the lake. Its first confirmed appearance in its final watery resting place was in 1964, but whether or not it crashed there, which it does not appear to have done so, or if it was placed there, there are absolutely no records, so it just really remains a mystery. Next, we have the possible discovery of a supervolcano hiding just beneath the surface of the Alaskan islands. The question of the volcano's existence first arose on December 7th of 2022 when John Power, a geophysicist at the United States Geological Survey's Alaska Volcano Observatory, presented a study that showcased a wide crater with arc-shaped ridges and around a 426-foot depth, 130-meter hollow entryway, presumably the tip of the supervolcano, and he presented it to his peers at the American Geophysical Union. While the discovery has yet to be confirmed, there is a mountain of evidence to support the existence of the mega underwater volcano. Geographical data, as well as data collection from seismometers used to record micro-earthquakes around the islands, point heavily to the confirmation of the volcano's presence. At this point in time, scientists are determined to confirm what exactly lies beneath the surface of these waters around the Alaskan islands as quickly as they can, because with the discovery of the possible volcano being so new, we have little to no information on whether or not this thing could blow at any time. And up next, we have another possible appearance and swift disappearance of underground pyramids hidden within the earth of the Alaskan Triangle. The discovery was made after a United States Senator, Hale Boggs, along with his pilot, Nick Begich, were flying over a part of Alaska commonly referred to as the Alaskan Triangle, known for its strange energy and high disappearance rate. As you might have guessed, both Senator and pilot disappeared, but that's not even the weirdest part. A survey of the area took place in an attempt to locate the missing persons, but instead found evidence of a pyramid-shaped major underground structure. However, when they went back to confirm their discovery, it was as though the pyramid had completely disappeared. There are many theories about the commonly referred to Dark Pyramid, the most popular being that it is an alien pyramid, heavily guarded by the United States government, and some people even believing that the pyramid has special powers, such as the ability to generate enough electricity to power all of Canada. But what do you guys think it is? Let me know in the comments, because I really love a good conspiracy theory. And starting off our top three, we have disappearances in the Alaskan Triangle, which of course was briefly mentioned in our last point, but let's dive a little bit deeper, because since 1988 there has actually been a recorded total of 16,000 disappearances in the area that lies between the lines of Anchorage, Juneau, and Utqiagvik. Of course, Boggs and Begich being among the missing. No one can figure out why this specific area has caused so much confusion and turmoil. Of course, there are many theories, the presence of the Dark Pyramid being one of them, rough terrain being another, and possible magnetic disturbances as well. But the crazy part is that it's not just planes that disappear when entering this particular triangle-shaped portion of Alaska. Reports of alleged kidnappings, getting lost in the woods, sudden vanishings, and being buried by snow are by no means of short supply. Scientists still can't seem to figure out what it is about this specific area that makes planes and people act so out of whack. Next, we have the petroglyph rocks found amongst the shores of Wrangell, an island town in part of Alaska's Inside Passage. For those wondering, a petroglyph is basically just a picture carved into a stone used to represent stories and knowledge, and if you'd like to see one, well, Alaska's got a bunch. While scientists argue over the purpose of the rocks, they have agreed that they were most likely created anywhere from 8 to 10,000 years ago, most likely by the native peoples that resided there at the time. But seeing as the depictions carved into some of the massive stones very closely mirror images of crop circles and other alien symbols, along with the fact that even after thousands of years the markings still remain so deep within the rock, the theory of the petroglyph's occurrence being a result of extraterrestrial artwork can't be ruled out. Not to mention, Alaska is also home to a giant underground pyramid, I'm just saying. And coming in at our #1 spot, we have the golden egg. Okay, this one is super cool to me because it was found in the ocean, and I'm always on the lookout for new aquatic discoveries, which, by the way, if you've seen any recently, please let me know in the comments. But anyways, the flesh-like golden egg was recently discovered in August 30th of 2023, and this thing is weird. Found in the depths of the Alaskan seafloor, marine scientists are absolutely stumped as to what this thing could be, but many have speculated that it is most likely the egg casing of a new, unknown creature. On a live stream, one of the scientists noted that the egg had a hole in it, saying that meant something had either tried to get in or out. Another one of the marine spectators noted that when our collective knowledge can't identify it, it's something weird, adding, what kind of animal could make an egg casing like that? The team of researchers was able to successfully collect the intriguing item from the seafloor and bring it to the surface, and have so far confirmed that the golden flesh-like egg is in fact of biological origin, meaning it's not just some prop or piece of trash, but they have yet to truly identify the strange discovery.
Some things scientists can't even explain, and that is scary. So let's take a look at some of the darkest discoveries made in North America. First off, we have the Bridgewater Triangle. The Bridgewater Triangle is an area about 200 square miles of southeastern Massachusetts, and there's allegedly been just some weird stuff going on there. There have been asylums here, prisons here, there have been cult deaths, there have been all kind of human activity, UFO sightings, Bigfoot sightings, strange serpents, will-o'-the-wisps, glowing balls of light, hauntings. I think these stories are not only connected to us, to our past, but to our region and to each other, an author from the area said. Yep, you heard that right, but that's not all that happens there. Giant birds or pterodactyl-like flying creatures with wingspans up to 12 feet are claimed to have been seen there. Now there are also the Native American curses. According to one story, Native Americans had cursed the swamp centuries ago because of conflict with colonial settlers. A revered object of the Wampanoag people was lost during King Philip's War. Legend says that the area owes its paranormal unrest to the fact that this belt was lost from the native people. Now, why do all these things happen at this location? People have no clue, but there's definitely something weird going on here for sure. Next up is the Mexican Altiplano metal balls. Hundreds of strange metallic-looking spheres of unknown origin and purpose have been discovered by archaeologists exploring the ruins of ancient Mesoamerican temple in Mexico. The spheres were uncovered by camera equipment robotic exploration rover on the floor of two previous sealed underground chambers in the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Now they are thought to be at least 1,800 years old and are about 1.5 to 5 inches in size. Their cores are made up of clay and other unknown organic materials, while their surfaces are covered in pyrite, also known as fool's gold, giving them a sparkly yellow coating. Now these spheres are thought to be offerings of some kind, as the temple was used by priests, but for now no one can establish their function because it is an unprecedented discovery, said archaeologist George Zalva. Moving on to the Centralia fire. The Centralia mine fire is a cold steam fire which has been burning in the labyrinth of abandoned coal mines underneath the borough of Centralia, Pennsylvania since at least May 27th, 1962. Yeah, a fire burning that long does not sound too good. It is burning at depths of up to 300 feet over an 8-mile stretch of 3,700 acres. Now at its current rate, it can continue to burn for over 200 150 years. When the fire first started, sulfurous fumes and carbon monoxide began seeping out of the ground, nearly suffocating some of the residents in their homes. Now, even more scary, the fire weakened the ground and it left it prone to sinkholes. Due to the fire in the 1980s, Centralia was mostly abandoned. There were 1,500 residents at the time the fire is believed to have started, but as of 2017, it had a population of 5, and most of the buildings had been demolished. Yeah, I don't know why anyone would still want to live there, but the fact that this fire could happen and there's no way to stop it is just so scary. Then there's the Georgia Guidestones. Located in Elbert County, Georgia, these granite monuments called the Georgia Guidestones were huge granite stones inscribed with words of advice that the author intended to guide humanity forward. Now, the creator wanted the stones to function as a compass, calendar, and clock. Meant to rival Stonehenge, R.C. Christian thought the Georgia Guidestones were superior because they had a message to communicate. The following inscriptions were sandblasted deep into the granite. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity, unite humanity with a living new language, rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things tempered reason, protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts, let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court, avoid petty laws and useless officials, balance personal rights with social duties, prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with the infinite, and be not a cancer on earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature. Now, the Guidestones were written in 8 different languages across 6 granite slabs. They were meant to serve as a guide for humanity in the world following a social, nuclear, or economic calamity. Now we have the unexplained lights of the Marfa. For more than 135 years, people have reported strange lights above the horizon in Marfa, Texas. No one knows exactly what they are, and that makes them both exciting and terrifying. Now, the first sighting was in 1883 when a young cowhand named Robert Reed Elson saw a mysterious dancing light as he was driving his cattle through the plain. Since then, pretty much everyone has reported seeing the pulsating, colorful balls of light along an uninhabitable stretch of prairie southeast of Marfa known as the Passano Pass. Now, there's no way to predict when or where the lights will appear, but the glowing orbs generally form fewer than 30 times a year, usually just after the sun sets or rises. Now, some say the lights are roughly the size of basketballs and dart widely across the desert or hover as they pulsate. Others say the spheres appear colored as they twinkle in the distance. Sometimes they're red, other times they're blue, yellow, or white. Often, a second orb will appear to split, merge, float, or melt into the first, and I just need to know, what are these things? Now let's talk about the Devil's Tramping Ground. In North Carolina, there lies a barren circle of earth where nothing grows, believed by some to be cursed by the devil himself. It's alleged that the devil tramps and haunts a barren circle of ground in which nothing is supposed to grow. Legends about the ring are well known in local communities. These include the disappearance of objects left within the ring overnight, dogs freak out not wanting to go near it, and strange events occur to those who spend the night within its boundaries. Now, it has been alleged that nothing has grown within the 40 feet ring for 100 years. Supposedly, it is where the devil walks in circles on certain nights, thinking of ways to bring his evil into this world. It appears that a journalist from the Greensboro paper spent the night in a tack smack in the middle of it with his 2 dogs to disprove the story. The reporter stayed the night, though he reported hearing ghostly footsteps circling his tent. So, what is causing all this? The devil. Duh. Now we have the hum. The hum is a name given to widespread reports of persistent and invasive low-frequency humming, rumbling, or droning noise audible to many people but not all people. Now, in late 2011, residents of Windsor, Ontario began reporting a low droning vibration, sometimes loud enough to be irritating. Now, one evening in 2012 saw 22,000 reports to officials. It's estimated that the sound was emanating from Zug Island, a heavily industrialized section of River Rouge, Rouge, and Canadian officials requested US assistance in determining the source, but local authorities were obstructed by official refusals to allow access to the island. A steel mill operated by US Steel was the possible cause, but officials stated that no new equipment had been installed or activated around the time that the noises became noticeable. Then there's the Taos hum. A study into the Taos hum in the early 1990s in Taos, New Mexico indicated that at least 2% could hear it, and each hearer at a different frequency between 32 Hz and 80 Hz. Now, it seemed possible for the hearers to move away from it, with one hearer of the Taos hum reporting its range was 30 miles. Now, what was causing this? We don't know, and again, I need to know. On to the Oak Money Pit. The Oak Island Money Pit is a mysterious site on Nova Scotia's Oak Island that has long been rumored to contain buried treasure. The legend of the Money Pit dates back to 1795, and what began as an innocent exploration quickly became a massive treasure hunt, with hundreds of searchers excavating the island for over 200 years. The Money Pit has been dug down more than 200 feet, but many believe the treasure lies much more deep as 500 feet. Now, as diggers have gone deeper, they've encountered multiple booby traps, such as flood tunnels and stone plugs designed to protect whatever lies at the bottom. So far, the only artifacts that have been discovered are 2 links of gold chain and a stone inscribed with the letters VI and C, which some believe stands for Viva Cristo. Now, despite these discoveries, the mystery of Money Pit remains unsolved. Many believe it contains a great treasure, while others think it may be a hoax. While hundreds of theories have been proposed, from hidden pirate booty to ancient Native American artifacts, no one knows what lies at the bottom of Oak Island Money Pit, and I'm not sure we ever will. Up next is the Well of Sacrifice. At the ancient Mayan site of the Chichen Itza, a sacred cenote known as the Well of Sacrifice, it was used for offerings and sacrifices, including human victims, as part of religious ceremonies to appease the gods. As Friar Diego de Lindana observed in 1566 after visiting Chichen Itza, into this well they have had and then had the custom of throwing men alive as a sacrifice to the gods in times of drought, and they believe that they did not die, though they never saw them again. They also threw into a great many other things, like precious stones and things which they prized. And so, if this country had possessed gold, it would be this well that would have a great part of it. Now, Edward Herbert Thompson dredged the cenote from 1904 to 1910, and he recovered artifacts of gold, jade, pottery, and incense, as well as human remains. And lastly, we have the Zone of Silence. The Zone of Silence is a spot in the Mapimi Biosphere Reserve in Durango, Mexico, where radio and TV signals allegedly do not work. The name was only assigned to this place in 1966 when oil company Pemex sent some people to explore the area. The expedition leader, Augusto Harry de la Pena, encountered problems with his radio, giving it the name. In 1970, an American missile fired from the White Sands Missile Base somehow went off course and landed right in the middle of the reserve, 400 miles south of its intended target. Since then, similar stories have been reported by residents and tourists alike. In the 1930s, a Mexican pilot named Francisco Sabera said that his radio failed to function when flying over the zone. Now, aside from radio signals, telecommunication signals also seem to fall within this area. There are also reports that compasses turn out of control when positioned near the stone on the ground. Large meteorites also landed near the Zone of Silence, and several theories have been made trying to explain these phenomena, but people think it has something to do with some sort of paranormal activity.
And we're starting off this list with what has been dubbed the Lover's Lane case. In 1990, a young couple, Cheryl Henry, 22, and Andy Atkinson, 21, headed out to spend the night together, but they were never seen alive again. Their bodies were found the next day in a wooded area in West Houston known as Lover's Lane. The scene was pretty horrific. There were slash wounds to both of their necks. Andy was found tied to a tree, and Cheryl was found underneath a collapsed fence. Authorities were able to take DNA samples of whoever the assailant was, but they were never able to match it to anyone, meaning most likely this guy had no criminal record. And I do say guy because of the type of DNA they obtained. Over 30 years later, this case has sadly never been solved, and whoever's responsible could still be roaming around out there. The Amber Hagerman case. Amber Hagerman, a 9-year-old girl from Arlington, Texas, was at her grandparents' house on January 13th, 1996. Her and her younger brother were out playing. Amber was on her bicycle and she started riding further and further down the road towards a grocery store. Her brother decided to turn back, but Amber never came back. She'd been taken by a man in a black van in the grocery store parking lot. There was only one witness to her abduction. An intense search effort began, with the community rallying together and law enforcement agencies mobilizing to try and find her. Sadly though, 4 days after her abduction, Amber's body was discovered in a local creek, not a long way from where she was abducted. What makes this case extra tragic is the fact that the assailant has never been found. This tragedy led Amber's mother, Donna Norris, to help establish the Amber Alert system, though, an emergency notification system designed to rapidly disseminate information about abductions to law enforcement agencies, media outlets, and the general public. That's that little ringer thing you get on your phone, the little update. The Amber Alert system has since been adopted and implemented in numerous countries around the world, so if there's anything good that came out of the case, it's that. Next up we have the Killing Fields. This is a stretch of land located in League City near Interstate 45, where numerous bodies have been discovered over the years, leading to one of the most haunting and perplexing mysteries in the state's history. Since the 1970s, law enforcement authorities have uncovered the remains of multiple victims in this desolate area, earning it the chilling nickname. The identity of the assailant or assailants responsible for these deaths remain unknown, and whose victims were primarily young women. Despite extensive investigations, the authorities have struggled to piece together the puzzle and bring the perpetrators to justice. Various theories and speculations have of course emerged over the years, ranging from the involvement of multiple assailants to potential connections with other unsolved crimes in the region. The families of the victims, as well as dedicated investigators, persistently seek answers, hoping to one day unveil the truth and find a bit of closure. The Phantom of Texarkana. The Phantom of Texarkana. Back in the spring of 1946, a series of violent attacks happened in a 10-week time span. Whoever this creep was, they wreaked havoc in the town of Texarkana, going on a rampage of terror. He operated at nighttime, targeting mostly young couples who were just minding their own business, parked in the dark corners of the town. There have been 8 victims, and 5 of which lost their lives. Law enforcement went into overdrive trying to catch this elusive boogeyman, but he managed to slip through their fingers every single time. The whole town was on edge, and folks were locking their doors, looking over their shoulders. The media ate it up, too, referring to it as the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, and the story spread far and wide, making this a pretty infamous case. The Phantom vanished as quickly as he appeared, though, leaving the town and its residents in a state of shock, confusion. Decades have passed, and his true identity still remains a mystery. The Icebox. In June of 1965, the residents of Houston, Texas were left in shock and confusion when the lifeless bodies of Fred and Edwina Rogers were discovered inside their own home. But what made this case truly macabre was the manner in which their bodies were found. They had been stuffed inside the family's refrigerator. The horrifying nature of the crime, coupled with the absence of any clear motive or suspects, has propelled the case into this realm of mystery. Investigations into the Icebox case were met with numerous baffling elements. The lack of forced entry suggested that the assailant was either known to the victims or possessed an intricate knowledge of their routines. The home had also been meticulously cleaned after the attack, which made, gathering up evidence pretty difficult. And there was also this absence of a clear motive, which really added another layer of intrigue to it, leaving the investigators grasping at straws for answers. Over the years, theories surrounding the icebox case have circulated. Some speculate that the crime was a result of a family dispute, while others entertain the possibility that someone could have been hired to commit the act. And then, of course, there are those who hypothesize that the assailant may have simply been a deranged individual who really had no motive and attacked them completely at random. At number 5 on the list, we have the televangelist bomber. This disturbing case began back in January of 1990 when a mysterious package was sent to Lakewood Church in Houston. The daughter of Pastor John Osteen opened the package and it exploded. Luckily, she survived, but received third-degree burns and cuts to her legs and abdomen. In April of that same year, a second package was sent. This one to the Christian Broadcasting Network in Virginia, where a security guard named Scott Sheepers almost lost his life. The package had looked suspicious, and the TV station had received death threats before, so they were on pretty high alert in general. They put the package through an x-ray machine. Sheepers didn't spot anything out of the ordinary at first, but something about it still seemed off to him. He went to cut into part of the box before taking a couple steps back, at which point the package exploded and sending Sheepers flying to the floor. He was transported to the hospital where shrapnel was removed from his leg and he did survive. Both packages had been sent from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Until this day, the identity of the sender has never been found. Number 4, Sam Bass's treasure. Alright, Sam Bass was this notorious outlaw during the late 1800s. He was known for his daring train robberies. According to the lore, Bass and his gang managed to accumulate quite a substantial fortune through their criminal activities, amassing a hidden treasure that till this day has never been fully recovered. The whereabouts of Bass's treasure has remained a mystery, fueling countless treasure hunting expeditions and inspiring countless stories and speculations. Many believe that Bass buried his loot in various locations across Texas, particularly in the areas around Denton where he operated. Some claim that Bass left cryptic clues and treasure maps, teasing treasure hunters with the possibility of finding his hidden riches. Over the years, numerous treasure seekers have dedicated themselves to try and unravel the secrets of the whereabouts of his treasure. They've combed through historical records, studied old maps, and explored the Texas landscape in search of his stash. Despite their efforts though, the treasure has never been found. It's kind of like a Western version of One Piece. I love it. The thing is though, I think if someone did find it, I mean, would they report it? Or would they just kind of like keep it to themselves? I don't know. Maybe someone has found it. At number 3, we have the case of Lori Ruff. Lori Ruff was this woman with a seemingly ordinary existence, although she was always rather secretive about her past. And her husband, Blake Ruff, had a lot of questions, and as it would turn out, she wasn't exactly who she seemed. In 2010, she ended up taking her secrets to the grave after taking her own life, leaving behind a trail of these perplexing clues and unanswered questions. Blake Ruff discovered a lockbox in her closet that only added to his confusion surrounding her past. It seemed as if Lori previously went by the name Becky Sue Turner. But Becky Sue Turner was the name of a girl who had died in a house fire back in 1971. So Ruff was left in kind of utter shock, confusion. Who was this woman he'd married back in 2003? Investigators were on the case, and as it turned out, Becky wasn't her only other name. Lori was actually born as Kimberly McLean, who had gone missing in 1986. She had run away from home at 18 years old. The question still remains though, why did she leave home and how did she acquire the birth certificate of a girl who died in 1971. At number 2, we have the Marfa Lights. The mystery surrounding the Texas Marfa Lights has fascinated locals and visitors alike for decades. Nestled in the remote desert landscape near the town of Marfa, these unexplained phenomena manifest as strange floating orbs of light that appear in the night sky. Witnesses have described them as glowing orbs of various colors ranging from white, yellow to blue and red. The lights often dance and dart and hover in the distance, defying all conventional explanations. Numerous theories have been proposed, of course, to explain the origin of these lights, but none of them have actually been able to fully unravel it. Some speculate that they are the result of natural occurrences like atmospheric gases or reflections from distant headlights. Others attribute them, of course, to supernatural or extraterrestrial origin, believing that they are the work of ghosts or alien visitations. Skeptics argue that the lights are simply the, product of illusions or, misinterpretations. But there's quite the allure behind it, and it's led to the establishment of viewing areas and research centers dedicated to studying and observing them. Scientists, paranormal enthusiasts, and curious visitors flock to the region in search of answers. That's something I'd like to see. I might have to take a trip to Texas, find some treasure, see some cool lights. It'll be a good time. And finally, we have the Loveland UFO case. This case stands as one of the most compelling incidents in the history of unidentified flying objects, and unfolded on the night of November 2nd, 1957 in Loveland, Texas, when the multiple witnesses reported encountering a series of bizarre events involving unidentified flying aircraft or aircrafts. Throughout the night, several motorists reported their vehicles stalling and electrical systems failing as they observed a large, almost egg-shaped object hovering in the vicinity. The witnesses described the craft emanating a blinding light and this intense heat. Accounts of the Loveland UFO sightings were remarkably consistent too, with witnesses from different locations reporting similar experiences. Law enforcement officers and local authorities were flooded with these reports throughout the night, which really adds to the credibility of the events. However, when law enforcement officers did arrive on these scenes, the crafts had already disappeared. This case attracted the attention of the United States Air Force, leading to an investigation by Project Blue Book, the official US government program tasked with studying UFO reports. Despite their efforts though, no definitive explanation was ever provided. Skeptics have offered theories ranging from, again, atmospheric phenomena to maybe electrical disturbances, but others believe this is genuine extraterrestrial encounter. But others still believe it's aliens, which I also like that idea a lot more. There's just this consistency and the number of witnesses, which again, very interesting.
Secret tunnel!
Kind of look like Aang a little bit.
You do!
Or is it pronounced Ong?
I smell a Halloween costume coming on.
Oh boy.
You guys, it's the end of the day and we're talking about tunnels.
We got some interesting stories here. I do mention a place I mentioned before, but a really interesting story. One of the best, I gotta tell you. We begin our underground journey in China with a series of underground tunnels found in the ancient city of Haochengzui. In 2023, archaeologists were doing excavations in the 4,300-year-old stone city of Haochengzui in Inner Mongolia when they came across a series of tunnels built beneath the city. The city was heavily fortified. In fact, it's ranked as one of the most tightly defended Inner Mongolian stone cities discovered to date. It was almost like the city from Attack on Titan. The inner city was surrounded by an outer city for defense, and outside of that, a walled gatehouse, so a triple defense system. There were also tons of terraces and moats. You were not getting in here easily, and if all defenses did fail, they had the recently discovered underground tunnels to retreat to as well. There were 6 intersecting tunnels about 5 to 20 feet deep that ran under the entire city. Not only would they have been used for extra security, but they also doubled as underground transportation systems connecting various parts of the city, kind of like what we have with underground walkways in cities today.
Next up, we have the newly discovered ancient tunnels of the Pyramid of the Moon, the second largest building in Teotihuacan, found earlier this year in Mexico. The tunnels have remained a secret for nearly 2,000 years, making their discovery groundbreaking in the fields of both history and archaeology. The tunnels are accessible via secret passageway in Plaza de la Luna, located in the center of the city. The passageway is buried 33 feet deep and it extends from the plaza all the way to the Pyramid of the Moon, where it turns into an elaborate labyrinth of underground tunnels. While no one has been able to enter the tunnels yet, modern technology has given researchers the ability to begin mapping their new discovery. It is believed that the Pyramid of the Moon in its heyday was likely used for religious ceremonies that would have included human sacrifice, which has brought researchers to the conclusion that the tunnels might possibly represent the underworld in accordance with the ancient Teotihuacan belief system. As I said, the tunnels are yet to be explored, but teams are hoping to check them out in the near future to see if they can uncover any hidden artifacts that might give them a more in-depth look into the ancient civilizations of Mexico. So keep an eye on it.
Next up we have Derinkuyu, a massive ancient underground city in Turkey. Now, I talked about this place just recently, but what I didn't know was how this place was discovered, and the story is remarkable. Let's just imagine for a moment that you're doing some reno work in your basement and you gotta knock down a wall, but after taking your sledgehammer to it, you notice a small hole. One of your chickens runs into the hole and you chase after it and you realize, holy crap, this isn't just a small hole, there's actually a full-on tunnel in here. And the tunnel leads to another tunnel and another until you realize that there is actually an entire underground city right behind your basement. I mean, wait, Narnia? No, it's actually how Derinkuyu was discovered in 1963. This story is true. The 280 feet multi-level complex was built in the 8th to 7th centuries BCE and was once the home of around 20,000 people. Imagine just finding that in your basement. It's nuts. One of the coolest stories I think I've ever read about.
Next up, we have a 4,300 foot long tunnel discovered in 2022 in Egypt, underneath the Temple of Osiris Magna that might just possibly contain the final resting place of the final ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra. Yes, like, James, I have mentioned this one before, but it's frickin' Cleopatra. I can't not talk about it. The temple where the tunnels are located is one dedicated to the god Osiris, also known as the god of the underworld, who symbolizes death, resurrection, and the cycle of Nile floods, which were necessary for agricultural success in Egypt in ancient times. Basically, it's the perfect place for Cleopatra to have been buried. As I said, the tunnels are almost 4.5 thousand feet long. They are also 6.5 feet tall and reside roughly 43 feet underground at the temple located just west of the ancient city of Alexandria, where Cleopatra is believed to have been buried alongside her lover Mark Antony. I mean, you've heard of all roads lead to Rome, but in this case I feel like all tunnels in Osiris's temple will eventually lead to Cleopatra. Statues and ceramics dating back to Cleopatra's time period have also been found in the tunnel, only furthering my personal belief and the belief of many that the tunnels do in fact contain her tomb. And I think sometime this year, maybe next year, we will find out the answer, because I know teams are working really tirelessly on exploring and kind of excavating the entire thing, so get excited.
Orvieto is a beautiful Italian city, but relatively recently, an entire network of ancient tunnels built beneath it came to light, known as the Orvieto Underground. It was something that was kept secret for a long time. Orvieto is built on a volcanic rock called tuff, which is relatively soft and easy to carve, and for thousands of years residents had been digging into this rock, creating an extensive network of underground passages and rooms. In ancient times, these tunnels were used for storing wine and olive oil. The cool, stable temperature underground was perfect for preserving stuff. There are also wells and cisterns that were dug to collect and store water. During medieval times, the underground was used more strategically. The tunnels acted as secret escape routes during sieges and invasions, and some of the caves were even used as bomb shelters during World War II. You can visit the underground tunnels today, but only through guided tours.
Next up, we have the tunnels of Chaban de Hontar, located in the highlands of Peru. Chaban de Hontar is a 3,000-year-old temple, which is impressive in and of itself, but of course it has become even more impressive with the discovery of an elaborate tunnel system located beneath the earth of the temple, believed to have been built sometime between 900 and 200 BC. It is believed that the tunnels hiding underneath Chaban de Hontar were built for ceremonial purposes, such as communicating with the gods, using incredibly advanced engineering techniques that allowed them to channel water and connect the city to the heart of the temple. Many artifacts have been brought up from the tunnels, including bowls and statues, one of which depicts a hybrid human jaguar figure. The discovery, made in the 1940s, has given archaeologists and historians some great insight into the ancient lives of Peruvian citizens.
One of the coolest places you'll visit in Poland is said to be Wieliczka salt mines, aka the underground underground salt cathedral. This is a huge subterranean complex near Krakow dating back to the 1200s. It's a huge rock salt mine. Rock salt at the time was very precious, and over centuries they transformed the mine into this extensive network of rooms, passageways, and tunnels that go more than 1,000 feet underground. Not only is this a massive underground complex, but it's not as utilitarian as you'd expect either. There's amazing artwork to see here. The miners used the salt crystal deposits to create chapels, chandeliers, statues. One of the most impressive features is a detailed replica of Da Vinci's The Last Supper, all carved from salt. The mine operated for a very long time too, centuries. It only stopped producing salt in 2007, so that's about 700 years of operation. Now it's a tourist destination, and from what I've heard, it is a must-see.
Next up, we're going to Italy because according to archaeologists, there is an entire ancient underground network of tunnels located directly underneath the royal palace of Naples, built in the 1800s by Ferdinand II of Bourbon, the king of the Two Sicilies, as an escape route for monarchs as well as a passageway for military personnel. The tunnels, which spanned all the way from the barracks to the royal palace, started being built in 1853, but just 2 years later, that all came to a halt when an explosion took place in the area due to a political uprising that would eventually lead to the end of the kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Luckily, construction was picked back up shortly after the incident, and the tunnels were completed on May 25th of that same year, 1855. Ferdinand II of Bourbon died in 1859, and in 1861, the kingdom of the Two Sicilies fell. In the 1900s, the tunnels were used as explosion shelters as well as a place to smuggle contraband, until they were closed off. Today, the tunnels have been reopened, and unlike many of the other tunnels on this list, except I believe the one James just mentioned, these tunnels can be visited by the public as part of a tour of the Royal Palace of Naples. If you've been, let me know down below in the comments.
We've all heard of the Colosseum, one of the most famous historical structures in history, the site of countless gladiatorial fights in ancient Rome. It's still around today, one of the most iconic landmarks in the entire world, drawing thousands of visitors each year. But it was only very recently that the tunnels underneath the Colosseum were opened to the public. The massive amphitheater itself is definitely impressive, but the hidden tunnels beneath offer a much deeper look into Roman culture and traditions. These underground passageways were actually where the gladiators would prepare for their fights. It's basically the ancient version of the backstage area of a concert or sports event. For a long time, tourists couldn't access the underground areas, but just in 2021, several of these hidden passageways were restored and opened to the public, which is pretty cool.
And finally, we have possibly my favorite ancient tunnels, the mysterious underground tunnels of Brazil that, no joke, scientists truly believe were created by either giant sloths or giant armadillos. In 2009, a farmer broke through a dry patch of soil into an underground cavity while he was out on the town on his tractor. Researchers were quick to investigate the area, and what they found was, well, pretty insane. An almost 50-foot long tunnel with a diameter of about 6.5 feet. After that, 1,500 more tunnels, including one with branching tunnels that altogether measured in at about 2,000 feet long, were discovered in the area. So, what made them? Well, a geologist by the name of Luis Carlos Weinschutz believes that they are the work of either giant sloths or giant armadillos that lived 10,000 years ago before the mass extinction of megafauna. While scientists are pretty secure in their explanation of what built the tunnels, they're still struggling to figure out why, as the tunnels are much larger than necessary if the animal had intended on using them to escape predators or as shelter in bad weather. Personally, I think the giant animals might have been attempting to create a secret tunnel for two lovers leading to Omashu, but you know, that's just me.
Alien artifacts that have come from far out in space have somehow ended up on Earth.
They have led to scientists uncovering disturbing truths that definitively prove the existence of extraterrestrial life in space.
What are these figurines supposed to be? Would you ever think that they were meant to depict humans? Certainly don't look human to me, but it's not just because they're very old sculptures. I mean, they look intentionally not human. They look reptilian. The noses, or lack thereof, the eyes. If these were meant to resemble people, they did a bad job. Either that or these were really horrifying looking folks. But if they're not meant to be humans, then what exactly are they? The statues are often referred to as the Ubaid lizard men. The 7,000-year-old artifacts were uncovered in Iraq in the 20th century. There are theories as to what these things could be, but no definitive evidence. Unfortunately, we don't have any written records of the time, so determining the ideas behind people's artistic expression in prehistoric Mesopotamia, it's not really the easiest, but I'm pretty fascinated by the idea that there may have been some reptilian aliens visiting Earth around this time that people were depicting here.
Definitive proof of life beyond our planet found inside of a meteorite that landed in Sri Lanka back in December of 2013. Yeah. When pieces of the space rock were gathered and examined back in 2013, a shocking discovery was made. The debris of the meteor contained fossils, algae fossils, of clear extraterrestrial origin, according to lead scientist Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe. Because algae is technically alive, if Professor Chandra's science is correct, the discovery marks the first documented discovery of life that originated from outside of our atmosphere. While the legitimacy of the work has been debated amongst Chandra's peers, who claim that the algae may have been embedded into the meteorite during its time on Earth, the professor is standing firm in his discovery and has claimed that among the algae fossils he discovered were other organisms that are not yet identified and do not match anything discovered on Earth thus far, which of course is great news for those of us who are really hoping that Chandra's discovery of extraterrestrial life is legitimate and that the doubters are just mad they weren't able to make the discovery for themselves.
Are these sculptures of planes? They kind of look like stylized planes to me, but that would be impossible because these are thousands of years old. They're artifacts from what is known as the Kumbaya period, a pre-Columbian culture which was around from about 500 BC to 680. They were known for their skill in metalwork. I mean, obviously these things are lovely, but yeah, they really do look remarkably like modern airplanes. They have wings that don't really look like bird wings to me, and a lot of them even have what look like tail fins. So how and why were these created? Did these people somehow have knowledge of what the future of air travel was going to look like? Were they encountering beings with highly advanced technology? The official explanation is that these are depictions of animals, you know, insects, birds, that sort of thing, and yeah, there's a very good chance that's all these are, but I can't deny how eerily accurate they look to modern flying machines. And here's another really interesting thing. In 1994, a group of German engineers actually built scale models of the Kumbaya artifacts to see if they could fly, and guess what? They did, with an added propulsion system of course, but the designs worked. They were aerodynamically perfect and could fly.
The Williams Enigmalith. What is it? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely from out of this world. It looks a bit like a rock with a plug, but it's not a rock with a plug, and it's far from being just an ordinary rock. The object was found in 1998 by a hiker named John J. Williams. He noticed a strange piece of metal coming out of the dirt on his hiking trail, and so he dug it up. When he did, he revealed a rock with 3 metal prongs sticking out of it. It looked somehow man-made and appeared to have some kind of electrical component to it. Why? Well, I'm not sure, but Williams, who is an electrical engineer, claims that the electronic component embedded in the stone was not glued or welded into the granite rock surrounding it, meaning that while it appears to have possibly been man-made, because electrical components don't just naturally exist inside of rocks, especially ones dated to be around 100,000 years old, it must be something else, perhaps from somewhere else, perhaps somewhere out of this world. While Williams is open to having others research the strange rock, he does have a few conditions. He must be present for whatever discovery is made, and the rock must remain unharmed. Even with these parameters, you would think that by using modern day tools and technology, we would have been able to get an answer as to what exactly the rock is by now, and where the electrical component is coming from and how it was embedded. But no such discovery has been made, leaving the leading theory to be that its origins Sumerians are likely not of this earth, and that it likely holds the answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet.
No one is exactly sure what this thing is. It's been dubbed the Wedge of Aiud and was found in Romania in 1973. Workers came across it while digging during a construction project. It was found buried along with two large mastodon bones. The wedge is around 5 pounds and it's made of aluminum. Now this turns out to be pretty strange because aluminum wasn't widely used until the 19th century, but this thing is estimated to be much older, at least 250,000 years old. It's a very odd looking object. It looks like a modern art piece or something, but what exactly is it? Well, again, nobody really knows for sure, but one of the funnest theories, of course, is that it's extraterrestrial in origin, maybe having come off an ancient alien spacecraft or something.
The Sumerian Triumph Tapestry, which appears to not only depict the succession of various rulers to the throne, but also the presence of UFOs hovering above the Sumerian people, is next on our list today. The tapestry was created in the capital of West Flanders province in the Flemish region of Belgium around 1538, and since then it has been the subject of many conspiracy theories, which makes sense considering the two alien spaceship-looking objects depicted in the top left corner of the piece. Now, if you know anything about the Sumerian people or the Anunnaki, you are likely well aware that even without the presence of the Triumph Tapestry, the Sumerians are a pretty good argument for the legitimacy of aliens having had a pretty prominent presence on Earth in the past. Adding the tapestry into the mix is really just the cherry on top of the extraterrestrial cake, because it confirms how the Anunnaki, the ultra-intelligent alien species that ordered the creation of the pyramids, arrived on Earth in the first place. If you don't know anything about the Sumerians, ancient Sumeria, and the Anunnaki, but would like to, I do have a video on them titled Ancient Sumerian Mysteries that may never be explained that you can watch after this.
Next, we have the Coso artifact, known as one of the world's out-of-place artifacts. It was discovered in 1961 near Olancha, California. While out looking for geodes, these rock collectors found a strange rock that seemed out of place, and when they cut it open, they were surprised to find it actually had a metal core inside. The outer layer of the rock was encrusted with a hard substance, while the inner metal core was a cylindrical object that looked almost like a spark plug. This was not what anyone had been expecting to find, because the rock seemed to be millions of years old, far older than the age of modern machinery. So it sparked, see what I did there? It sparked a lot of curiosity. Some researchers think this is just a naturally occurring geode that somehow formed around a modern spark plug, but what if it's not the case? What if it's a piece of ancient technology left by an advanced civilization? Or even more interesting, an object that some extraterrestrial beings left behind a long time ago.
I'm sure by now we've all heard the theories that the pyramids were built by aliens, which is a fair assumption considering the fact that historians have been consistently unable to come up with an explanation as to how the construction of the pyramids would have been possible in ancient times. But what about other massive artifacts like Stonehenge, or perhaps the massive stone head that was found in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle in the 1930s? The statue dates back to before the Spanish Revolution, so prior to the Mayan and Aztec empires falling to the Spanish armies, which is strange considering one, there is little to no way the Mayans living in the area could have sculpted the stone head and placed it in the area, and two, if somehow they did, why doesn't it look like them? The statue's features do not mimic those of the ancient Mayans or Aztecs. Because of this, it is believed that the features once displayed on the head, which have since worn down due to revolutionary troops using the historic artifact as target practice, were actually the features of an ancient alien civilization that was far more intelligent than humanity, and that likely had a hand in the construction of the Mayan and perhaps even the Aztec empires as well.
This next one is actually 100% known to be from space. Back in June of last year, Harvard professor and theoretical astrophysicist Avi Loeb led an excavation to Papua New Guinea to uncover the remnants of a meteor that had crashed into the Pacific Ocean, and what they found were small spherical space rocks from deep in space, and there's still a question as to whether the object they came from was naturally occurring or not. What they do know is that the small spheres are made up of elements we don't have here on Earth. Loeb wrote, quote, "This is a historic discovery because it represents the first time that humans put their hands on materials from a large object that arrived to Earth from outside the solar system."
Finally, we have an incredibly mysterious extraterrestrial object discovered by the Betts family in 1974. That year, a mysterious fire had broken out on the family's property that destroyed 88 acres of woodland. When the Bettses went out to explore the area and search for the cause of the mysterious fire, they stumbled across a metal sphere with a diameter of just 8 inches and a weight of almost 20 pounds. At first, the family thought that the object might have belonged to the Soviet Union or perhaps NASA. They thought about leaving it where they found it, but curiosity got the better of them, and so they decided to take it home. About 2 weeks later, the family's son was playing guitar while sitting next to the strange spherical object when all of a sudden it began to emit a strange resonating sound that caused the family dog to act up. A while later, the family discovered that when they pushed the sphere across the floor away from themselves, it would change direction and return to the person who had pushed it. Not only that, but the object avoided being damaged at all costs, rolling up slanted tables to keep itself from crashing on the floor, and eventually it began emitting pulsing sounds seemingly out of nowhere. The strange behavior was witnessed by scientists as well as representatives from the military, so you don't just have to take the Betts family's word for it. At first, the Betts family refused to let the ball out of their possession, but after doors started slamming shut and music began randomly playing in their home, they handed it over to the authorities, who were shocked to discover that the metal ball was just that, a metal ball, or so it appeared. While there is no solid explanation as to why the sphere displayed such strange properties and caused so many strange things to happen, I think we can all agree that the most likely reason is because it came from outer space with a purpose that has yet to reveal itself to mankind.
Apparently the Ural Mountains can be terrifying.
Record floods, radioactive hikers, and possibly a Yeti attack.
Well, let's start with some recent news from the Ural Mountains. April of 2024 saw record high flooding in Russia's Ural Mountains. Thousands of people needed to be evacuated. The flooding from melting snow was the highest it had been in decades. The Ural River, Europe's third longest, surged, reaching a dam near Orsk in the Orenburg region, leading to a state of emergency. Authorities issued urgent evacuation orders, with the mayor of Orenburg, Sergei Salman, stating that, quote, "Absolutely everyone who is in the flood zone needs to leave their homes. Do not delay the evacuation. The situation will only get worse in the next 2 days." And it did. Over 10,400 homes across Russia were flooded, severely affecting regions like the Urals, Siberia, Volga, and central areas. People were hiking neck deep in floodwater, and the streets were just completely submerged. Boats needed to be used for transportation.
Hikers turning up dead in the middle of the mountains is one thing, but when they turn up dead and radioactive, it's a whole other thing. In February of 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers went up into the Ural Mountains to hike Dyatlov Pass. They never returned. When authorities went out to look for the missing men, they were greeted with a grisly scene. The first thing they came across was the hikers' tent, which appeared to have been ripped from the inside. Next, they found shoe prints, sock prints, and even bare footprints in the snow, leading away from the campsite where the hikers would have stayed. Considering the cold temperatures in the Ural Mountains in February, this was strange to say the least. Rescuers followed the prints to find the bodies of 2 of the missing men, and in the months that followed, the remaining 9 were also found. At first, it was assumed that the group had died of hypothermia, although why they would have stripped down in the freezing cold was beyond the scope of understanding. However, the theory was quickly disproved when an autopsy report showed that one of the 9 bodies had signs of blunt force, another had 3rd-degree burns, one had thrown up BLOOD, and one was straight up missing a tongue. Not to mention, many of the men's clothes were tested and confirmed to be literally radioactive. You wanna know how this happened? Me too, along with most of Russia. But unfortunately, for right now, we really have no way of knowing how these 9 hikers met their gruesome end in such an incredibly bizarre way.
One of the most jaw-dropping discoveries in the Ural Mountains are the megaliths, specifically the ones on Vera Island. They date back to the Neolithic period around 5000 to 3300 BC. You have megalith number 1, megalith number 2, number 3, Vera Island 9, and Vera Island 4. Megalith number 1 though is the biggest, measuring a hefty 52.5 by 29.5 feet, carved right into the bedrock and capped with massive stones. And it's got a pretty impressive layout. It's a long entrance, a central hall, 2 chambers, a connecting corridor. There are windows and sculptures featuring bulls and wolves. As for what it was built for, a lot of archaeologists think it might have been a temple back in the day. No one really knows who built these megaliths, how they managed it, and exactly what they were for. They stretch across a vast area too, which means different groups might have built them for different reasons. Sure, megalith number 1 seems like it may have been used for religious practices, but the others don't show a lot, if any, signs of being used for worship or rituals. So, pretty puzzling.
What's better than 2.5 men? 7 strong men. Massive megaliths surrounding the northern side of the Ural Mountains, known as one of the 7 wonders of Russia. The structures are massive, measuring in at over 30 to 42 meters, 137 feet. They are top-heavy and extremely confusing because it appears as though these 7 gigantic structures quite literally defy the laws of physics, which of course begs the question of how these upright structures were erected in the first place. There are 2 explanations, and while one is not exactly scientific, I will share it with you anyways. Locals in the area believe that 6 Samoyed giants living in ancient times were traveling through the mountains in an effort to reach Siberia, so that they could fight and destroy the Mansi people. However, while making their way across the landscape, they ran into a shaman who turned them to stone. The same shaman was later turned into a stone himself. If you look at the formation, you will notice that 6 of these strong men are huddled together, while the 7th sits apart facing them. It is believed that the 7th stone is the shaman watching over the giants. Scientists, on the other hand, believe something else. That 2 million years ago there were high mountains where the stone pillars now stand, and that over the years the soft rock of the mountains was destroyed, leaving behind the massive pillars. But that's no fun.
So the Dyatlov Pass incident gets talked about a lot, as Hannah just did, and for good reason. It's one of the most terrifying mysteries in history, but there's another creepy theory that maybe it wasn't some toxic chemical the group was exposed to that caused them to tear each other apart. It wasn't an avalanche, it was a large beast that was responsible for the deaths of the hikers, the Yeti. At least he could have been involved in addition to the toxic stuff. This image here is said to be one of the last photos taken by the group. Is this just one of the hikers? Or is this someone or something that was stalking them? Just for a little context, back in 1959, a group of 9 hikers mysteriously died in the Ural Mountains. They were found in strange circumstances, their tents torn up on the inside, some were found nearly naked in the freezing cold. They looked like they died violently. As Hannah said, one was even missing a tongue. The scene looked like something completely savage had ransacked their campsite. So I don't know, I find the avalanche theory pretty weak given the state these poor people were in. Everything just points to something more deliberate, and it's not like there have never been reports of a hairy Bigfoot looking creature in those parts, so I don't know. Could be possible.
Ancient technology from hundreds of thousands of years ago, coupled with fireballs lighting up the sky and cigar-shaped UFOs, make for a pretty complex mystery, and of course some pretty good content for extraterrestrial enthusiasts. In 1991, geologists exploring the Ural Mountains discovered some pretty interesting nanostructures after digging 30 feet down into the earth. Minuscule metal coils and springs were extracted from soil that had remained untouched for centuries prior, leading scientists to wonder, where the hell did they come from? I mean, some of the fragments are as small as 1/10,000th of an inch, and the incredibly precise shape of the fragments has led scientists to believe that they had to have been manufactured. Not only that, but the smallest pieces were tested to reveal that they had been made of tungsten, a metal used in spacecraft construction because of its ability to withstand high temperatures. Whether or not this discovery is proof of aliens is up for debate, but scientists are convinced that the nanostructures are proof of an incredibly advanced civilization living in the Ural Mountains in ancient times.
So not only have there been remains of mammoths found in the permafrost of the Urals, but sightings of living mammoths as well? Apparently there have been, and more than one. At least there have been reports of creatures over the years that look a lot like mammoths. Obviously these could be misidentifications or hoaxes, but there are more stories than you'd think. In 1920, a French diplomat shared a strange story he'd heard from a Russian fur trapper who claimed to have spotted giant shaggy elephants deep in the forest. One Russian explorer, Georgy Bashikrov, had an encounter that apparently haunted him forever. He'd been leading an expedition when he witnessed a massive reddish-brown creature with huge tusks waltz out of the forest, wade into a river, and then vanish. There are also stories of Soviet aircraft crews claiming to have spotted mammoth-like creatures from the sky in 1948. Then in 1978, geologists said they saw what looked to be a dozen mammoths calmly drinking from a river before disappearing into the woods. But what about solid evidence? Well, there were massive footprints found in Chukotka in 1948. They measured 27 inches wide and 20 inches long, way bigger than any known animal tracks in the area. They were found with trees smashed high above the ground, as if something mammoth-sized had passed through.
An abstract stone image carved into the grasslands of the Ural Mountains that might just predate the famous Nazca lines by thousands of years has led scientists to wonder why and also how. The shape appears to depict an elk with an elongated muzzle, 2 antlers and 4 legs, and possibly a tail. The animal is about 275 meters, 900 feet long, the equivalent of 2 American football fields. It also would have been visible to ancient tribes from a nearby ridge located north of the structure. At one time, the stones depicting the animal also would have appeared white and shiny, but their contrast has dampened over the years due to the fact that they are now covered with a thick layer of soil. Researchers believe the image is likely the product of the Ural's rich megalithic culture, as the mountains are literally littered with massive structures from the north all the way to the south. Investigations regarding the significance of the image, however, are still ongoing, so if we find out anything interesting, stay tuned for that.
One of the coolest caves in the Ural Mountains is Kapova. Not only are there cave paintings from the last ice age here, but the late Paleolithic era as well, when Cro-Magnons were walking the earth. And on top of that, bones from ancient animals were found in this massive cave. The place is basically a prehistoric art gallery or museum. There are images of mammoths, bison, rhinos, and the paintings are actually a lot less primitive than you'd think as well. There's attention to detail and storytelling here. Some scenes depict hunting, expeditions, and rituals, and archaeologists have, again, found ancient tools, jewelry, and bones of extinct animals like cave bears. I just can't imagine how incredible it would be to explore a place like this and just be fully immersed in the prehistoric ambience, with paintings drawn on the cave walls by early humans who just had no concept of how far the human race would grow and evolve. Really cool.
Perhaps one of the most perplexing discoveries made in the Ural Mountains is the discovery of a massive pyramid, several times larger than the Egyptian pyramid of Cheops, found in the subpolar section of the Ural Mountains. The height of the pyramid is almost 800 meters, and it's clearly aligned with north, south, east, and west, with clear and clean 90-degree angles, leading scientists to conclude that the structure must be man-made. But the territory in which the pyramids were found were not places where ancient civilizations would have lived, but rather the area would have been used solely for ritualistic practices, making the find all the more fascinating and also incredibly mysterious, because I'm wondering, what were they worshipping? If we follow classic pyramid theories, it's probably aliens.